Hey there, this is Austin with Nation Media, and in this video I'm going to go over in video format the documentation for the Impact NationBuilder theme. I'm going to post blue timestamps next to each subject in the features and guidelines that you see below in the written documentation so that you can easily take a look at those timestamps and then come back and reference the video. So with that being said, let's get started. On the header image, we see that there's just a blue background right there. But if we go into our site settings, header image, and we upload our image, we see that what was the blue background is now a picture of Big Ben. If we create another page that is not the home page, we'll see that it's going to look the exact same, just without the sign-up form. Now, it's important to note that if the page has published featured content sliders, so we'll go ahead and we'll go to the About page and add a couple of featured content sliders. Those featured content sliders are going to override the header image and push the headline, and if the page had a subheadline, down into the content section. So that's basically what you need to know for the header image section. Let's move on to the background image. So what we'll do first is we'll actually create an action page on the site, because background images on this theme will only display on action pages. And an action page is classified as a donation, donation V2, endorsement, feedback, money bomb, petition, sign up, survey, volunteer sign up, and vote pledge page. So if we just go ahead and create a demo volunteer page, publish it, and volunteer sign up. When we take a look at it on the site, we're going to see that it's just a normal setup with the header image. But if we go to site settings and we upload a background image for our site, we'll go ahead and we'll upload the coral reef here, and we tag the action page background page, and then go to the page, we see that it now has the background image we uploaded as sort of an all-encompassing background image that does not scroll when the rest of the page scrolls, so kind of a cool effect there. But the main thing is that it's now a big background image. The one thing to note is that donation V2 page types in NationBuilder are the only page type that has its own background image. So if you do upload a background image to your donation V2 page, it's going to override the site's background image. So oops, actually, we'll go ahead and we'll tag the donation V2 page background page. And we see that it also has the coral reef, but if we upload a background image to it, let's upload this picture of the Golden Gate Bridge. And then we go back to the donation V2 page, we'll see that it has overridden the default site background image. So that is what you need to know for background images. The only other thing is that if you do use the full background layout, by tagging the page background page, it's going to hide the page's activity stream and page tags. Meaning if you're displaying the people that have like signed up on the page, that will be hidden when there's the full background page. So that's it for the background image. And let's move on to page headers. So one of the main things to note in your page header is that in our themes, the page's excerpt will display as a subheadline. So let me see if I can get some text here. So we've put in an excerpt, and of course the excerpt in the social media is the same for the excerpt in SEO. And if it's a basic page, it'll be the same as the excerpt in the content section. So if you change one, all the others change. But if we go back to the donate page, you see that now the subheadline is appearing. So this is important to note because in most NationBuilder themes, the excerpt for a page does not appear anywhere on the site. It only appears in search engines and when sharing on social media. But in our themes, it does those things in addition to being a subheadline for your website. On the donation V2 page, actually, we'll start here. If you remove a page's headline, meaning you leave it blank. So if we go to donation V2 and we leave the headline here blank, that's going to remove that header section altogether. And so you just have a form and a background image. And it does this on all pages, even if it's not a full background page. Now, on a donation V2 page in particular, and this is again only for the donation V2 page, if you don't have a headline, but you do have a donation settings intro, let me copy some dummy text from Lorem Ipsum. Make this an H4. So if you do have an intro, but no headline, that intro is going to show up in the form itself, only on the donation V2 page. Otherwise, if you don't have a headline, even if you have an intro is just going to be the form and the background image. So if we take a look, we do that real quick just on the volunteer page. You see this awkward header up here all by itself. If we remove that headline and save the page, it's just going to be the form. It's the background image. So there you go. Lastly, on the home page, if you have a page's defaults primary sign-up page, you're going to get the sign-up form in the header section, only on the home page. And this also will determine whether you get a sign-up form in the sidebar or not. If you disabled that primary sign-up page, you will see that the homepage header section looks just like any other header section, such as the About page. Oops, no, we have the featured content slider still on the About page, but if we didn't, it would look like any other page, or it would look like the About page. So that's it for the page headers. Let's move on to the top navigation. So we see in our top nav right now, we have the donation V2. It's just a normal top nav link. But let's say that we disabled that appearing in the top nav by unchecking this box. And then we went back to the supporter nav. Oh, this was here from a little practice run of this video I did, but usually this would be blank. So we would just type in the button text, and then we would type the page that the button links to, the slug, and we would save it. Did that save? Nope. Now it did. We're now going to see a big red donate button at the top instead of just the normal link. So in most NationBuilder themes, that supporter nav, those supporter nav buttons, they show up in the sidebar In our themes, they show up in the top nav. We do recommend using a maximum of 2 buttons, even though there's a 3rd button available. However, you can, of course, do what you want. And then the last thing in the top nav is under Site Settings. Use Dark Facebook Like button. I don't even think this is a feature anymore, but the checkbox is still there. So we actually turn that checkbox into a different feature. So when you check it and save, and then you go back to the site, we see that our top nav has now turned blue. The reason you might want to do this is because you like the look, or perhaps more commonly, because the colors of your logo, which we have not uploaded, but when you upload your logo, the colors of your logo would contrast better against your theme's primary color, which in this case is blue, than it would against a white background. So that's it for the top navigation. Let's move on to the supporter nav. So in the back end, if you go to a page's settings and you check include in supporter nav, we'll do this for a few pages here just so we can get a nice little nav going in the sidebar. So if you check that box for a page, and you know what, we will also go to Site Settings and clear the cache so we know it appears. And we will actually put the sign-up form back. All right, so after we check those include and supporter nav boxes, we see that we get a nice little sidebar nav here. So basically, in most NationBuilder themes, include and supporter nav checkbox puts that button in the sidebar when a user is logged in. In our themes, it puts that button in the sidebar whether a user is logged in or not. And so it's more correct to think of that feature as include in sidebar nav as opposed to include in supporter nav. So just be aware of that. That's it for the supporter navigation. Let's move on to the sidebar signup form. And what I want to highlight here is that this headline and this subheadline come from your site settings, headline and subheadline, which is right here and right here. That's it for the sidebar signup form. And lastly, in the features section, we have image sizes. So you will notice all of the images that I have uploaded for this theme, such as Big Ben, the Coral Reef, and the Golden Gate Bridge. None of these images have text on top of them. And the reason for that is because these themes are background images, which means they scale to the screen size. So the Golden Gate Bridge is going to look different in a really narrow screen than it is on a wider screen. If you have text, for example, in like the bottom left corner, and a user has a really narrow screen, that text may get cut off in the bottom left. So as a rule of thumb, in this theme and in modern websites in general, don't have text in any images. And then lastly, these images should be generally horizontally rectangular and high resolution. They shouldn't be more than 1 megabyte in size, ideally less than 500 kilobytes in size. So that's it for image sizes. Let's move on to the guidelines section, and we'll start with changing your basic theme variables, such as your font and your colors. So if we go to the back end and go to Theme, Files, we want to look for theme.scss. So on Mac, I'm going to do Command F and type in theme.scss. On Windows, you would type, I think, Control F and type in theme.scss. So mine is at the top here. And we click that and we see one line, but then we see change your colors and font here on line 3, and then this to close the sandwich. So we see here we have your brand's primary color, And then this is the value in hex code format, which is probably what you want to use. You want to get your brand's primary color in a hex code format, which is a 6-digit code for the color, and paste that in here with a hash in front of it. And then your brand's secondary color, which is the same in hex code format. This color, the brand's primary color, corresponds to the blue color that we've been seeing in the demo theme, and this corresponds to the red color that we've been seeing in the demo theme. This gray base right here, again in hex code format, is your site's text color. I would refrain from changing that, but if you do know what you're doing and you want to change that, you can. One thing I would say is this gray base is used not only for text, but also for the various other gray colors on your website. What you want to do is you want to include a pretty dark color that is about 20% away from black. Now, if you don't know what that means, I probably would not alter this color, but if you know what that means, this will give you a good, that will give you a good sort of guideline for what kind of color to put in here. And the last thing is we have your site's fonts. Now, these can all be the same fonts. You can have this font as one font, this font as another font, and this font as a third font. Or you can have like this font as the first font, this font is the second font, and this is the same as the first font. Doesn't matter, lots of options, but if you do want to change the values here, you could just simply input the appropriate font and save. One thing to note is that the main font here that we changed to Poppins is going to be used for headings on your site and other text that is not body text. The body font is going to be used for body font. So if you have an about page and you have a lot of about text, that text is going to be in this font family serif. And for buttons and the top nav and a few other similar things, you're going to use this third font called the monospace font, and it is Roboto Condensed. Again, these, even though this says serif and monospace and sans serif, they don't have to be. It's just the most common way to organize it. So that's it for your basic variables here that you might want to change. The other thing is that below there, we have all these other variables. Some are gray, that doesn't matter, you can still edit those. You can edit any of these variables. The one thing I would say is that you should be proficient in CSS and Sass before editing any of these other variables, but they are here for you to change, and you can kind of change the look and feel of your site if you know what you're doing. So that's it for the main variables. Let's move on to including your font script. So you can change the font there, but you also usually have to add a font script. What you want to do is you want to search for _nm-partial-font scripts. Find that file. And if you had a different font script because you were changing the fonts, you would delete this line and paste in your font script here. Unless you are using a typekit font, in which case NationBuilder has a built-in feature here where you can just put the key that is in this format and save. So that's it for including your font scripts. Let's move on to including sort of analytics and other sort of advertising codes in your site. So an important thing to note is that in NationBuilder's site settings analytics, you can include Google Analytics, your Google Site Verification key, your Chartbeat API key, and your Chartbeat UID. But if you have other analytics shortcodes or advertising shortcodes that you need to put into your site, I think they're usually called pixels, like a Facebook pixel. You can do so in the theme files, and it's actually one of two files. Your shortcode should give you instructions on whether to put the code in the head of the website or before the closing body tag. If it goes in the head of the website, you can search for nm-includes.html, find that file, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and we see these little comments I've made here. Make a line in between and paste your shortcode in there. then save. If your shortcode goes before the closing body tag, you want to find _nm hyphen scripts.html, not .js. Find the .html version, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and again, we see similar comments where you can paste your shortcodes in between and save. So that's it for analytics and advertising shortcodes. Let's actually take a look again at the demo site, because there are a few things you can change just by changing some values to true or false in the theme files. So usually this lighter blue nav bar, and this was dark blue when the navigation was white. In fact, let's make the navigation white again. All right, so this top blue bar, which would usually have social media icons if Facebook and Twitter was connected to the site, if you did not want this here, all you would have to do is go into the theme files and find layout.html. Scroll down to line, looks like 46, and this is the start of these layout variables that you can change to true or false. We see here the secondary nav variable. If we change this to false and save, that top blue secondary nav would no longer be there. It's going to take a second to load because we just changed the structure of the theme, and it's decaching it. So it's no longer there. If we do the same thing, we could do the same thing for the supporter status that shows in the sidebar when a user is logged in, the breadcrumbs that appear on a page in a gray bar below the header section, email sharing on your website. So if you don't want the button for people to share via email, you could disable that. And Twitter emphasis, which is if you would prefer a Twitter feed to appear instead of a Facebook feed. So you can toggle these variables and change these values on your site. Oh, I forgot social sign-in. So if you don't want the autofill buttons or the sign-up buttons for Facebook and Twitter, you could make that false, and those would go away. So these are very easy ways to change a few default options in your theme. And then the other thing to note is you want to do this in layout.html. You also want to do this in splash.html because these variables exist there as well, and you probably want your splash pages to look the same as the rest of your website. So that's it. And the last thing is that if you are proficient in CSS or Sass and you do want to add custom-coded styling to your website, it's best done in a file that I made specifically for that, which is _nm-theme.scss. And we see here that we have custom styling, and you want to place your custom styling below. And then, oops, and you can save. So that's where you should put your custom styling. It's going to override any of the default theme styles, but again, I wouldn't touch this unless you are proficient in CSS, adequately proficient in CSS and Sass. So that's it for the impact documentation. I hope this was useful, and feel free to get in touch if you do have any further questions regarding the theme. You can get in touch via email, or you can shoot us a call. So thanks, and good luck with your cause or campaign.